Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, talking some Oklahoma Sooners. This is a team we've talked a lot about on the high school recruiting trail, a lot in the transfer portal. Now we're talking about how this team looks in 2023. Dylan and I gone back to the spring practice notes, back and watched some 2022 games. Going to give you guys our takes on how we feel about this Sooners team heading into 2023 and how they can win a Big 12 championship. I mean, you look at this team on paper, they certainly have the talent to do so. It just needs to come together a little bit. Now, before we get into it again, just want to say thank you to you guys and especially the Oklahoma fans. You guys have shown a ton of love talking high school recruiting, talking transfer portal. We just broke down the Champ U barbecue weekend that they'll be having this weekend. So appreciate you guys for checking the fellas out. Dill, I'm going to kick this one to you. I want to start with how you're feeling about this Sooners program heading into 2023.
I mean, he's kind of Brent Venables, that is taken a bit of a different approach this season in general with the way he hit the transfer portal. And you saw what they did in his first year. They really didn't go out and get that big crop of guys. I mean, they got Dylan Gabriel, for sure, a big move, but they really didn't do a whole lot else. And frankly, the guys they got really didn't make a big impact on their team. You look, especially on the defensive side of the ball, they're bringing in some monster players who played exceptionally good at their previous schools and probably fit the way Brent Venables wants to play defense, which is a bit more physical and aggressive and in your face.
I think and we're going to start on the defensive side of the ball because that's where I do think you're going to see some meaningful improvements for this program. But I think you're spot on in the sense that Oklahoma and Brent Venables came in and he wanted to run a defense that was starkly different from what Lincoln Riley and Alex Grinch were doing. In terms of we want to get downhill. We're not going to really play that bend but don't break and hold you to a field goal in the red zone. We want to get after you. I don't think he had that personnel to do so. And you're right. He kind of missed in the transfer portal in his first year. In 2023, he did not miss in the transfer portal, bringing in those guys that are going to allow him to play that brand. And Dill, when you talk about Brent Venables and his defense, it starts in the front seven. Let's start with this defensive line and some of the playmakers that they have heading into 2023 that are going to be some impact players.
I mean, obviously, Rondell Bothroyd was
arguably
their biggest guy. Portal. I mean, just if you don't watch Wake Forest, and obviously the alum over here certainly watches the share Wake Forest, you don't really know who he is probably because, again, Wake Forest guys don't get the respect.
Yeah, it's a joke.
Football program. But a guy who plays very much that when you think of the guys who played really good at Clemson for Brent Venables, it was big physical defensive linemen, both at the D tackle spot and the defensive end spot. Rondell Bothroyd fits that kind of mold perfectly because he's a gigantic defensive end, not like the greatest of athletes, but an extremely heavy player, really good at getting off blocks and just super disruptive in both the run and pass.
I mean, he was a guy when Brent Venables was the defensive coordinator in 2021, with all those good defensive linemen. Rondell Bothroyd was the first team All-ACC guy. Brent Venables knew about this guy before he even stepped foot in Norman. And so he sees Rondell Bothroyd hit the transfer portal. No doubt that was a quick phone call made it happen. They got a great one in Rondell Bothroyd, who I really do think could be a first-team All-Big 12er. But you look across this defensive line, not only is the talent there, but I think Brent Venables got that depth too. And we saw that for so many teams. You want to talk about the starters, especially on the defensive line, but what's even more important is the depth. We talked about it at length. Why is Georgia so dominant? Yeah, they have good dudes, but they also go 2 to 3 lines deep of guys that are just absolute studs. You're seeing Oklahoma kind of develop that. Now, a couple of guys I really do like. Ethan Downs, he's an absolute stud. I think Reggie Grimes is really good. You have really good guys on the interior with Isaiah Coe and
Jordan Kelly. You're sleeping on Jordan Kelly because Jordan Kelly might be one of the better guys on this defensive line. I mean, I went back and watched, and you kind of would have thought Redmond might have been that guy or some of the other guys, Johnson, the transfer, obviously. But you look, Jordan Kelly was a monster. And to me, it's going to be about a guy like Isaiah Coe to take a step forward in what can Lacey and Sears bring in terms of depth, because they were a little thin there last year. It felt like beyond maybe a Kelly and a Redmond and some of those other guys, like they really kind of did take a step back and gave up too many yards in the run. I think maybe, again, Lacey and Sears look good in the spring game. You might have 4 guys who you can roll in and be really competitive with 2 waves of guys now.
Now, there's one guy that is a newcomer, but not through the transfer portal. And it's going to be true freshman PJ Adebari, who you talk about it. Like going back to Dabo's days at Clemson, he kind of prioritized like the heavy-handed guys like Rondell Bothroyd, some of the bigger edge rushers. PJ Adebari, not necessarily the biggest, but I mean, there's a reason this dude was a 5-star out of high school. The burst, bend, and length off the line of scrimmage for this kid is extremely special. It's really hard to see a world where he doesn't play significant reps for Oklahoma as a true freshman. So you take a look at this pass rush, you're suddenly feeling really good about the negative plays that they're going to be able to create. And that only helps a crop of linebackers that we're very, very high on, and Danny Stutzman and Jaren Kanak.
Danny Stutzman is awesome. Like, I went back and watched.
We're so back on the Oklahoma hype train, and I love it.
It did us last year, but I'm back, and
I want back on it.
Must be really good. But Danny Stutzman, like, again, not the biggest linebacker in the world. I mean, he plays that way that Venables wants to see him play. He is very downhill. He takes on blocks hard. I think he's like, again, maybe just puts on 10, 20, 15 pounds between his sophomore and junior year. He's ready to rock and roll.
Yeah, Danny's, I mean, I don't even think he needs weight. He's, 6'4", 235. He's actually bigger than I thought.
That is kind of lean. I mean,
yeah, I don't need Danny Stutzman to do anything different than what he did in 2022, because I thought he was an absolute freak. He was really good for Oklahoma. Jaren Kanak, also a guy that I think is going to take that step. This is a good group of linebackers. Then I want to talk about, in my opinion, you ask me who's going to have the biggest impact on this Oklahoma defense this year. It's going to be Deshaun McCullough. And I mean, the versatility that this guy offers, and we talked about how Brent Venables wants to play defense. That's what Deshaun McCullough represents. I mean, this dude, he can blitz off the edge. He can work in space. I really hope they use him in a lot of different ways. I want to see him blitzing off the edge. That's where he excelled at Indiana. But, man, you're getting a guy that's probably going to play that cheetah role, that dummy versatility, dummy speed and athleticism. I think he's probably going to have the biggest impact on this Oklahoma defense in 2023.
And you talk about negative plays and plays that'll like kind of bring some energy to defense. That's what he's going to you got to hope he provides, because it was such a glaring missing hole in terms of what Oklahoma's doing. It just, you never got fired up watching him play defense. It was never like putting a ton.
It didn't seem like Brent Venables defense.
And that's, again, you got some guys now, and that's what I think the biggest thing is he hit that portal and got two guys at least who you think can maybe give Brent Venables the tools to do what he can do and what he's done exceptionally well at teams like, or obviously.
Hey, I'd say three guys, because we're moving to the back end, and Reggie Pearson. You talk about Brent Venables' defense. Reggie Pearson's that dude, and I could almost see a world where they kick Reggie Pearson down on the cheetah spot and say, hey, Deshaun McCullough, go rush off the edge. Just go be an edge rusher for some of these snaps, like a 3rd and long. If they could force some 3rd and longs and you get like Deshaun McCullough and PJ Adebari coming off the edge, like that's when those turnovers, that's when those big-time negative plays start happening. Now, this secondary, as good as it is on paper, they just need to clean it up. Like, it's when you go back and watch Oklahoma, it's not like they're physically not able. Like a team like Arkansas just did not have the dudes to cover SEC wide receivers last year. That's why that secondary was so tough. This Oklahoma secondary has the guys. They just need to clean it up. Billy Bowman, I expect a big-time step up going into his junior year. The cornerback spot, like Woody Washington's played a lot of football for Oklahoma. I think this group can be good. It just needs to come together. And second year under the scheme, I'm confident, or at least more optimistic, that it's going to come together year 2.
And that's going to be what it is. Again, you look, it's got the talent to do it. And even last year, it wasn't physical mistakes that was hurting Oklahoma a lot. It was, busted coverages. Yeah, guys looking at each other like, I thought you had him. Didn't you have him? A lot of that.
A lot of space for wide receivers to work with.
9 players at times.
Yeah.
And that just can't happen. And it can't be the case. Again, I do think adding a little bit more juice in the pass rush will probably help this unit out a lot. And also being a little tougher against the run, frankly. So you got to think, I think the front 7 can help this unit be better, but they still got to play better football.
God, I probably just pissed off so many Oklahoma fans by not referencing Peyton Bowen, too. Like, he's going to play a lot, too. We mentioned PJ Adebari as a true freshman. Peyton Bowen, from what I'm hearing, is like special dude at that safety spot. So, like, whether they kick Reggie Pearson to that cheetah roll, Peyton Bowen's going to find the field. Like, it's – you can tell we're back on the hype train because we're just naming pretty much every player on this roster. We're really into this Oklahoma team. We're high on the personnel
defense again. play defense. Brent Venables played defense.
They certainly have the personnel to make that happen. Now, Dale, if they are going to win a Big 12 championship, kind of take that step, you do need to see some improvements on the offense side of the ball too. And I'm going to say I think people are too hard on Dylan Gabriel. Like, you're seeing some fans say like Jackson Arnold should be the starter. Like, Dylan Gabriel, did he leave some meat on the bone last year? He sure did. He also battled some injuries. Like, he needs to take a next step. Like, there's no question about that, but I don't think he was nearly as bad as most people are saying.
Well, frankly, for the bulk of the year, he's a really clean player. It's just the problem is kind of when you think of like some of the moments of their season, there were too many times where it was Dylan Gabriel not making the throw that they need to make.
Yeah.
When you think back to that Kansas State game, he's got to hit Drake Stoops on that wheel route. That's an easy touchdown. You can't overthrow him. And those type of plays just need to be made if they're going to take that step. Because you talk like they lost 5 one-score games. That's one more throw. Can you convert one more third down? Can he step up and kind of will this team to win at times more than maybe he did or was doing last year? And that'll, again, quarterback is the most important position, and you need a big year out of Dylan Gabriel.
And he's shown it too. Like at UCF, like this dude's very accurate with the football most of the time, gets the ball out quick. He's a good athlete. I will say, if Dylan Gabriel starts missing some throws early on in this schedule, and you start maybe taking out some to the wire, toss to the wire early, like the Jackson Arnold chance, they're going to, and for good reason. Like Jackson Arnold, if Dylan Gabriel struggles, you have a true freshman who I think is very ready to win some football games at the Big 12 level. Jackson Arnold, a special talent. Now, around the quarterback, like again, this offense was pretty solid. And I kind of want to go to the running backs first because DeMarco Murray's done a phenomenal job grabbing his guys out of high school and developing those guys. Javante Barnes, Gavin Sawchuk, 2 running backs that Eric Gray was awesome last year. Like we were both very high on Eric Gray going into the NFL draft. These 2 guys, very, very talented young running backs.
I mean, they're going to be a different style for sure. It's going to be a much more physical, like grading style of run because this is what those 2 do. I mean, they're bigger, they run hard. They're not as shifty as Eric Gray or probably as good in space, but man, they're going to be a load to deal with in the Big 12, that's for sure.
Man, Javante Barnes, when he ran the football last year, did not look like a true freshman. Like he's delivering punishment. And again, you're going to miss a guy like Eric Gray, but like I am pretty confident that this run game will not really skip a beat. The bigger question mark I have is the pass catchers. This group, you lose Marvin Mims. It has a lot to prove. I want to start with the transfer and Andrew Anthony, who we know very well, obviously as Michigan fans. Andrew Anthony, I think, has a chance to really excel going into his 3rd year of college football. Michigan, like you saw Andrew Anthony flash some special traits as a true freshman, got phased out a little bit year 2. And keep in mind, Michigan runs a lot of 12 personnel, a lot of 2 running backs at sometimes. So there's not that much room for wide receivers to really produce. And I think that's why he looks for a change of scenery. I can't think of a better offense for Andrew Anthony to go into than Jeff Levy's system, though.
And that's the thing in Jeff Levy's system. It's a lot more open. I think guys with wideouts especially can get more free releases. You just never had that at Michigan because it was most of the time you knew Michigan was going to try to run it a lot. It was play man coverage on the outside. In a guy like Andrew Anthony, again, not the biggest of wide receivers by any means, but much more of a guy who operates well in space, and that's where you want him, and that's what Levy does. That is the opposite of what Michigan does. There is never any space for wideouts. It feels like, and a guy like Anthony, I probably suffered a little bit from that.
So going to some of the other young wide receivers that need to step up, Dale, you're a massive Jaleel Farouk fan. Like you should see the way Dale texts me about Jaleel Farouk. He has a crush on him. Like there are some wide receivers that are extremely talented in this unit that are going to need to step up when Marvin Mims and Jaleel Farouk probably the guy that I'm most excited for to take that next step heading into 2023.
And that's going to be the thing. Like they are losing their guy from last year, and Drake Stoops is awesome at what he does in that slot role. But in terms of the playmaker on the edge, it was dominated by what Marvin Mims did. In Jaleel Farouk or Andrew, one of those 2 is probably a need to step into it. And to me, Jaleel Farouk has now proved it much more so at the college level in terms of being a guy who's just really good once he catches the ball, making plays, kind of doing things to hit those big chunk plays that we talk about that makes it just easier to move the ball more consistently. in what Mims gave them. I think Fruch's got to step up, have a monster year if this team's going to go
He's
where
the
they.
guy that I'm looking at. Like I like Jaden Gibson. I like Drake Stoops. If you're asking me who's going to lead this team in receiving yards, it's probably going to be Jaleel Farouk, followed by Angelo Anthony, and then maybe like three Drake Stoops, Austin Stogner. Austin Stogner has it just feels right to see him wearing an Oklahoma helmet again. That just I remember watching him in South Carolina. It just like made me scratch my head. Happy he's not going to be a guy that's going to win all Big 12 awards. He's going to be a damn good tight end that works the middle of the field. Like there are some talented guys around Dillon Gabriel in terms of playmakers. They just need to step up. And the last unit we kind of have to talk about is this offensive line. And what a get for Brent Venables. You lose both your starting tackles, one guy in Anton Harrison, who we both absolutely loved in the draft process. Every Power 5 team in the country wanted to start and left tackle out of the transfer portal. Oklahoma able to get one of the best in Walter Rouse coming from Stanford. But Coach Biedenbaugh like does a phenomenal job developing these dudes, and this I think is going to be another very, very good Oklahoma offensive line.
Yeah, no, it was a solid unit for sure last year. Again, you are losing two big time players at that tackle spot, but you do like what you're getting back, especially on that interior, adding a guy like Caleb Schaefer, because Mettauer and Raym played really good football, I thought. And again, I don't necessarily think this offensive line is going to be like one of the better in the nation, probably, but it's not going to be a unit that's going to hurt this Oklahoma team, I don't think. And who knows, if a guy like Tyler Guyton steps into like ultra talented Walter Rouse, we kind of know what he is. If Mettauer Raym take some steps, they might be better than I think. But I don't see this offensive line being in any way a liability, as much as it may not be the strength of this team.
Yeah, and that ball comes out quick in terms of pass block. They do a good job. Dillon Gabriel, for all like he gets the ball out quick, gets the ball out on time. So I'm not too concerned about that unit either. Now, Dill, this is the most exciting part about this for Oklahoma is like looking at their schedule. It's Texas. Like I look at if this Oklahoma team's as good as we think it is, and obviously that's like an if because they weren't as good as we thought they were going to be in 2022. Like, what other team in the Big 12 is pushing this Sooners team outside of Texas?
I mean, I feel like you're disrespecting TCU a little bit. No, I mean they obviously play some really good.
Okay, but you don't play Kansas State. That's kind of what I was getting at. Like,
Fair.
okay,
they aren't playing like necessarily the meat of the Big 12. Obviously, a team like Texas Tech off the schedule and
Kansas State, yeah.
No Baylor. Like you are missing some big dogs from the conference.
They'd smoke Baylor.
Like,
I know they lost to Baylor last year. I think this team smokes Baylor this year.
Fair enough. But like again, it will be Texas and maybe to a lesser extent, but still an extent TCU.
Yeah, and I mean, like there are some trap games like on the road. Like you can't look by going on the road to BYU. Like that's a hard place to play. But like you look at this schedule and it's hard not to think like that Texas game is the only game that I don't even know if I'm not picking Oklahoma in that game. All I'm saying is that's the only game where I don't have them at least 3.5 point favorites. Like, and maybe TCU is close depending on how TCU looks. Bill, this could be like if everything comes together for Oklahoma, like this team is certainly capable of winning a Big 12 championship and quite frankly, having an argument at a top 4 team to get into the playoffs if they can take care of business because this schedule is very, very gettable for Brent Venables and the Sooners. That'll do it for the boys. Again, went to almost 20 minutes. I mean, we had a lot to talk about for this Oklahoma Sooners program. You guys know we kind of rock with it. So appreciate you guys checking us out, giving us a listen. If you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.